We're the members of a dying breed. That's why we gotta stick together.
I saw the ocean so darkened with blood it was black, and the sun fainting away over the lip of the sky.
Truth in art.
The greatest kindness one can render to any man consists in leading him from error to truth. And that was a quote by Thomas Aquinas, ancient philosopher, I suppose, at this point. Medieval, at least. Medieval philosopher / saint of the Christian faith. Very interesting guy, actually. When I was back in my university days, we studied him very briefly in one of my classes. I can't remember which one it was. And he came up with this concept of fair price. And the idea that you should price whatever products you make at a fair rate, not overcharge people. It's sort of a humanitarian way to look at your own product. Anyway, that's not related to the episode today. Welcome to the Truth in Art podcast, the second episode of the fresh and new season. I am Connor Fowler, joined by Antoni.
Hello, everyone.
And today's episode is actually on pilgrimage and what it means to go through, let's say, an internal pilgrimage and exploring the concept of pilgrimage. Antoni, do you want to give people maybe an idea of what your definition of a pilgrimage is, or what it means to you?
Yes, well, I suppose the most important part of why we're doing this is because of the journey that we've decided to take individually and together on this pilgrimage, this inner, for us it's an inner spiritual pilgrimage, and it's the idea of going on a journey which has a definite end, a recognized specific point that you're trying to reach. And of course, even with a physical pilgrimage, there's never any guarantee that you'll make it all the way. And it's the same thing, of course, with an inner spiritual pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is a spiritual journey of unfoldment of the self. And so you physically go somewhere. Usually it's done on foot. And I think the reason for that is because walking speed, you control your own body. You walk, you put if you're on a train or whatever, you're not the one in control of the movement.
Yep.
But you walk, and of course you reach many physical limitations. As we know, we like walking in the mountains. And the first hour is great. Second hour is not so bad. Third hour is starting to really hurt. And by the fourth hour, you're crying. There's agony. There's when will we find the bus or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's a pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is that process of learning about yourself through thick and thin, I suppose.
Yeah.
The good times and the bad. And the fact that you can't really just stop. Because also the idea with the pilgrimage is it's not a convenient little day trip or whatever. You can't just, if I use the example of the mountain, when we're halfway down Mount Vitosha, which is over 2,000 meters high, we can't just say, oh, I can't do this anymore, let's find a car or a taxi or whatever. There is none of that until you get to one of the villages. So you must continue, and you have to find the inner resources, the inner strength to get yourself off the mountain.
Yeah, it seems like the idea of pilgrimage, let's say traditionally, if you were to look at it on a very superficial level, it's to reach, let's say, a spiritual destination for some fulfillment of self, but also to give reverence to wherever you're going.
Interesting, yeah.
But the way I feel and the way you've described it makes it seem to me, especially when you're referring to an internal one, it's actually dissolving or breaking of barriers. Because even when you're conquering the walk of a mountain or any sort of walk, even an actual physical pilgrimage, you are going to face a lot of barriers physically. And you got to overcome that because you got to reach a certain destination or a certain point or whatever. And that's including internally as well. And, the internal pilgrimage, I suppose, the internal pilgrimage is one in which has no end. Because, let me refine that. It's almost just a substitute word for, let's say, seeking.
Yes,
right?
but may I interrupt and disagree at the same time?
Okay.
Because I think the important part of being a pilgrim, as distinct from being a wanderer, because a seeker...
I never said wanderer.
I know,
Yeah.
I know you didn't, but my point is that you said it almost has no end. The important thing about a pilgrimage is it has a definite end.
Yes.
And
yeah,
the reason that I am starting on this pilgrimage, this inner pilgrimage, is if it has no end, then it's no different to what I've been trying before, which is every day trying to deepen my spiritual understanding, my spiritual awareness, my evolving of myself. The pilgrimage that I'm choosing to go on has been inspired by, as I mentioned in one of the previous episodes, doing this 30-day yoga. Because what I notice is, if you say to someone you've got to climb a 2,000 meter mountain from the bottom to the top, which is not what we have done. We've only gone from the top to the bottom. Well, you might say it's easier. It's a different kind of pain. But anyway, it's a different story. But if you've got someone who's starting from zero, they barely walk to the bus or the car, and then you tell them they've got to walk up a mountain, that's a huge and daunting process. And just in this 30-day yoga thing that I've been experiencing, knowing that it's only 30 days keeps you going when you're failing. When I'm trying to bend myself into shapes that I just cannot do without some sort of weird pain or can't hold myself up or whatever, I remind myself, and so does the instructor, Adrian, that you're 20 days into it, you've been doing great, well done for showing up. Can you believe it? You're here. Do your best. And this really, the kind of inner emotional comfort and confidence that's given me has really inspired me to try this on my spiritual journey. Because it allows you to push yourself a little further than you would naturally push, because you know it's not forever. And it overcomes that natural resistance and that self-talk that says, I can't do that, I can't achieve that, I can't, get up at 3 a.m. every day for the rest of my life. Well, probably not, but you can maybe do it for 3 days, So this is why I think the pilgrimage is important, because you have a destination. You're going to Jerusalem, you're going to Santiago de Compostela, you're going to wherever. The pilgrimage is, I'm going to that place. I'm not getting distracted and going to a different place halfway along my journey, because the pilgrimage isn't complete unless you get to your destination.
Okay, now, fair enough. I've posed a question then. Mm-hmm. Where's the internal one? What's the destination?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. And one of the reasons I really wanted to document this process every day, even though we're not uploading every day, but definitely we're recording every day, is that right now, I can only speak for myself here. I'd be interested to hear your point of view. Right now, I'm formulating that destination. Because at the moment, I'm really just looking at, based on our program yesterday, how do I know what I know? So at the moment, I'm in the process of tearing down as much as I can all the facades, and again, it's only as much as I can, the crutches that I use to kind of prop myself up a little bit spiritually every day. The gurus I listen to, the books I read, the spiritual chat that I listen to, whatever it is, the spiritual practices I have, I'm looking at all of those things and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to stop all of that, and I will pick up only those things that are giving me results, even though that might be in the smallest way. So a small thing might be, as we've discussed, not drinking alcohol. Not making a big deal out of it, not making it oh my God, the spiritual path, you can't drink alcohol. No, really much more a process of, this hasn't been making me feel good lately. So purely from a physical point of view, I'm not going to do that for now. I'm not going to put forever on anything. I'm not doing that for now because it's inhibiting the process I'm trying to go through.
Yeah, it's cultivation of the environment in which you can then blossom.
Yeah, that's great. Yep.
But the interesting thing I wanted to point out is we're talking about destination,
Yeah.
right? And I asked the question, well, where's the internal destination? One thing that we haven't actually explored, which is very important with pilgrimage, I think, is the destination is rarely ever relevant. It's what happens when you're walking there.
Yes, that's
the
true.
journey
but it
of
gives you a
taking-
point to
Yeah,
aim
sure.
at, doesn't it?
It gives you a path, literally,
Yeah.
because you walk that path because many have walked before, or whatever it is. But it's not the church at the end that actually matters,
Yeah.
nor is it the mountain that you're
Well,
looking for.
sorry.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
Wait, let me finish.
Yeah.
It's not the mountain. It's not the church. Rarely that actually has any relevance to what happens during the pilgrimage. It's many points throughout the journey that change you, and it's the gradual shift. Most of the time, even when you're thinking of starting a project or whatever, you can look at them as a pilgrimage, right? I'm starting this new endeavor. It's not an endeavor, it's a pilgrimage to X or Y, right? Let's say you're starting a business, because that's just a cliche one that everyone seems to be doing nowadays. The end goal, I mean, you can name hundreds of them. I want to sell it, I want it to grow, I want it to do this. Rarely, though, those are ever reached. It's how you go about doing that, the process of you finally selling that business, finally growing it to X number of users or whatever it was. It's all of that beforehand that matters. It's what makes you that person. It's not the actual selling of the business or the growth of it. And I think that's very relevant to the pilgrimage as well. And that's sort of why I was relating it to earlier as the internal pilgrimage. Saying that word a lot, it's hard to structure it. It's that internal pilgrimage is a consistent thing. And noticing it as something that you desire or want to have happened is already important, because you've set a non-existent destination per se, in the sense of you've chosen to be part of the process and find yourself through that process. And then when it's funny in a way, because when you realize that you're finding yourself in that process, you've actually reached the destination to some degree.
Okay.
You give me a face, and I think you completely disagree with
I
what
do
I'm saying.
disagree. And the reason I disagree, there's a couple of reasons I disagree. One is, it's the process, not the destination. That's a cliche in itself.
It is a cliche, yeah.
It's a cliche, and cliches have their value, actually. But the problem is that cliches are very much like the how do I know what I know. We just take them, we just suck them in as though they're self-evident truths. And you said, it's not the church at the end that matters. Well, frankly speaking, I know you've never been on a pilgrimage physically, and neither have I. So we don't know that that is true.
No, I can't know that is true.
Right.
Yeah.
And until we do it, we don't know that maybe you walk into that spiritual temple destination that you're aiming for, and that is essentially the culmination of the whole thing.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
And we don't know that you don't have the greatest spiritual revelation in that moment. I don't know, because I haven't done it.
No.
What I will say is, we once went on a journey to a holiday to Arran, the Isle of Arran, which is an incredible, beautiful island off the west coast of Scotland. And many people talk about it being sort of a magical place and so on. And we literally went there on one day, stayed overnight, and caught the ferry back the next evening at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
We only stayed one night.
That's true.
And the journey in itself was an experience for sure. There was a lot of learning on the journey, and it was exciting and it was fun. But actually,
We saw sea otter as well.
yeah, but we only saw the sea otter when we got to Arran.
Yeah.
Not on the way. On the way, we had other adventures. But when we actually got to the island, which I'm paralleling to reaching your destination, right?
Okay.
The temple, the series of experiences we had there were incredibly profound and magical, and were nothing like the experiences we had on the journey. They were different experiences.
Well,
So I'm just
okay.
paralleling. I
No,
haven't done a pilgrimage, but what I'm saying is that
completely
experience
agree.
is the closest thing I have to a spiritual pilgrimage, because it certainly was a very spiritual experience going and coming back and being there. There were 3 parts to the whole.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying I believe one has to have a destination if you're going to call it a pilgrimage. And the place, the destination, to make it a pilgrimage, the destination also has to have some sort of, in this case, spiritual significance. Now, you've asked me, well, what is the destination? And
That's referring to the internal.
yeah, the internal pilgrimage. What's the destination? And as I say, for myself, I haven't decided that yet. And it is a decision, I suppose. One chooses it. There was another quote from Thomas Aquinas we saw when we were looking for quotes, when he said, "What does it take to become a saint?" ? Will it? Just, you need to want that. If you want to become a saint, you will become a saint. That's what it takes. That's all it takes. What does it take to become great at yoga? You have to want it. That's the thing. You have to want to be that. So right now, I haven't fixed my want firmly yet, because this process of removing the spiritual crutches is part of the process of freeing up the space inside to be able to then identify a destination. At the moment, I feel like my internal landscape is so full of landmarks that are placed there by other great writers, teachers, people that I've met, but also by education, by culture, by ideas that I've just allowed to grow like weeds that unchecked, that I actually can't see the internal horizon in order to choose my destination. I do believe, though, that I get to choose any destination I want. And that's super exciting. And I don't want to rush into that, because once I choose it, I'm heading in that direction, and all the other options for the meantime are not the direction I'm going in.
Yeah. Well, having said all that, I think there is an idea of the destination. And it's partly the reason you were bringing up Thomas Aquinas, which is exactly the quote we chose. And actually, having read it, you may think it's not actually really relevant to pilgrimage at all. But the last part, I'll just reread it real fast. It's, "The greatest kindness one can render to any man consists in leading him from error to truth." And that last part, truth, being the ultimate destination.
Well,
So
yes,
where'd you go beyond that?
truth, beauty, and goodness. That's where you go.
Yeah, that's.
But
what's-
truth's the
yeah.
first part.
Well, true. Well, true.
That's true.
But,
No, you're
but,
absolutely
but,
right.
But having said that, the destination of truth, but truth within oneself, it's the reality of truth. None of this bollocks of your truth and my truth and all that. It's the truth. That can be found from within. And I think it can only be found from within, because if you wish or will to see life and reality as it is, you can only see it through the perspective of truth, nothing else. And this internal pilgrimage to the temple of truth, if you
Yeah, I
will,
love that. Absolutely
is
love that.
what that journey consists of. But and I truly believe this, is that the process of getting there is more important than actually being there. Because without the process, or even the realization of desiring that process, you could never reach that. because essentially then you're just sleepwalking or not even walking.
I don't feel the need to say one's more important than the other.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
for
Yeah.
me,
No, probably you're right. Yeah.
the only thing I can do right now is to tear down everything that blocks my view as best I can. And I'm really aware that, I mean, how do you know what you know? How do you know the truths and the falsities that you have inside? You have to methodically go through everything and check each one, or, being the impatient person I am, burn the whole forest down and start again. And allow only those things to grow that prove themselves. You know, so that's where I stand at the moment.
In what sense, though, by prove themselves?
That I at the moment, prove themselves means they enrich my life and expand my perception. And my perception isn't just the five senses, because, well, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume that you at least suspect, if you don't know, that we as human beings have way more than five senses.
Yeah.
And this is where, you know, people like Sadhguru and Rudolf Steiner and many, I mean, every great sort of spiritual teacher talks openly about the fact that, of course we do. You know, we have perceptions way beyond the five that we think we have now.
Yeah.
And so how do I know? How do I prove? How do I test what remains? Well, what remains enhances my perception and improves my quality of life. And you know, I once had a very long, painful conversation with an atheist who, I mean, I wasn't instigating the conversation. We were at a party, and he really, as I find atheists often do, they're sort of like proselytizing their atheism. And at the end of this long and tedious conversation, where I was saying to him, look, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I just know that I look at my life now and I compare it to how it was before, and my life now is happier and more fulfilled, and I feel happier and more fulfilled than I did before, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
I don't need to prove that God exists by poking him in the stomach. I don't care. Honestly, where I am right now, I don't care that God exists or not exists.
Yeah.
I want to just improve my experience on this earth right now in the most meaningful way to me.
Yeah. Well, it's all you have, right? It's all you really know you have. And I think we spoke about this, or at least I spoke about this a little bit in the last episode, about God being the scapegoat for your non-belief or anything you don't really know.
Yeah.
You know, and that's good. Fair enough. I feel like that's actually what his role is. You know, whether or not it's a redundant statement to try and convince anyone, or to try and even convince yourself that this thing is real. You know, because you know at least that you are real, and that's a good starting point. Everything else you can chuck to the side and throw to God.
And if you
know?
don't think you're real, if you're one of those people who says, but how do I know if I'm real?
Poke yourself with a knife.
Stab
You'll know
yourself
very fast.
in the pinky
But
fingernail.
anyway, before there was this point where you mentioned expanding perception and enriching life. I absolutely agree with expanding perception, not so much with enriching life. Things can be known that expand your perception, but not necessarily enrich your life.
Such as?
Because I believe as well that if you are, the part of expanding your perception is to to disregard anything as being good or bad in your life. Because I think if something is to enrich your life, actually I don't even know if that's what you meant by enriching your life.
I'm
I
not
just
talking
assumed
morally.
it. I just
Not at
assumed
all.
it. Yeah. And enriching your life in the sense of, I'm gonna guess, making it better in some way. Or actually, I can just ask you what you meant.
Well, enriching means to make something richer. Now, what does that mean? That means increasing the amount of something. Now, to enrich...
One's life?
Well, to enrich, just say cream. You know, it has more fat in it. The more fat it's got, the richer the cream. Or to enrich an individual financially means they've got more money. So enriching my life means I've got more life. Now, what does that mean?
Okay.
That means I'm very present. I'm
full of life.
I'm full of life. And that, and as simply as we say that statement, that person's full of life. That's what I want. Now, someone like Sadhguru says, be full of joy. Well, okay, but I'm happy to be full of life because as a European intellectual, I suppose I can call myself that because I'm very much in the head, joy, I instantly give definitions to joy. Yes, it's an experience, but I also define it and I imagine it in certain contexts. Whereas I can imagine myself being full of life.
Yeah.
And that means I might be crying.
It's true. But
passionately crying about something.
Well,
right?
I think another thing to add to that is even when Sadhguru mentions it to be full of life, the natural state is to be joyful because you are full of life.
Yeah.
And I agree with that as well because he often says you can choose between suffering and joy, right? As in two default states between life. And I can get that. I can get that. That's not to say, sadistically speaking, that you can expand your perception through suffering, because I think that's a very apt or a very possible way of doing something. But having said that, I do think that it is a detrimental to oneself if chosen to do it from a space of knowing what you know right now. As in, I think to experience life through suffering, I think you must have had a revelation through joyful experience to know that, I mean, it's very sadistic, that truth can be found through suffering. And it's a weird one because
I don't think it can be.
I don't think. I mean, I do.
Suffering
believe,
and pain. Now, what are we talking
yeah,
about?
it's true.
Here?
I think I'm mostly talking about pain because
Right,
I do
because
think that
pain's
suffering.
different.
Yeah, pain. I think I'm relating to suffering now. I'm relating to pain is what I meant because suffering is a symptom of your psychology or the
Correct.
way you think,
Absolutely.
and that is separate from what truly is to be full of life. Because I don't think. Or let's say in a balanced state, you have your mind, your body, and let's say something else. I'm not going to say soul because I'm not 100% sure that that's what I want to integrate. I know it's a word that people use. Atma is another one, soul. This sort of extrasensory organ of yours that happens to be you as well, but separate, if I'm going to look at it intellectually. To align that, and this is what I was saying before about the environment, cultivating that environment so those humors are in balance.
See, this is where it's interesting because you're saying soul, you're saying humours and so on. I think it's so important, again, coming back to this idea of pilgrimage. If you were to go on a physical pilgrimage a week from today and you knew that pilgrimage was going to take you 30 days on foot, and there was no guarantee, or there was very little guarantee of, certain things that you'd have to sleep outside, you'd have to carry a lot of your own food, whatever, you would be preparing very much right now physically, right?
Well,
wouldn't you? Because if
Well,
you were
I
going
don't-
on a pilgrimage for 30 days, you'd have to make sure you had good shoes, good coat.
yeah, no,
okay,
no.
maybe
in that
you wouldn't
sense,
carry
yeah,
your whole house
taking
with you.
taking care of the
Of the basics
of the
is what I'm
basics.
trying to say.
Yeah. But for myself, if you were to ask me that I'm going to do that in a week, I would be preparing myself mentally.
Also,
Because what I would be thinking if I was going through a process like that, let's say we're going through wilderness or something like that, it's my state of mind that matters more
yeah.
than my physical nature.
But I would argue that your state of mind, and again, I use going up the mountain because the very first time that we went down that mountain, we were not prepared physically, hardly at all.
No, but it's...
And mentally, it was just having a positive attitude. We were grateful it wasn't raining. It was a beautiful sunny day,
Precisely,
etc.
but it got me to the bottom.
But, yes, but that, I would say that's, from my point of view, that's not something I feel the need to prepare because I'm choosing to do it, and therefore that's okay. That
Yeah, okay.
but
I
I'm
can
not saying
get
that that's not relevant for everyone else. I think for myself, spending a lot of time thinking about how I'm going to deal with it, I find and have found in my life doesn't actually help me so much. What helps me though is really getting back in touch with the fact that I've chosen to do a thing. It's a
Yeah,
different
yeah.
story
I
if,
think-
if you haven't
yeah,
chosen it.
I think you misunderstood me when I meant by mentally preparing mentally. I'm not thinking about how I'm going to deal with it. I'm preparing my mindscape, if I could put it that way, to encounter situations that will be unknown to me.
Yeah, but how do you prepare yourself for that?
You just say, you cultivate that environment. You know, you bring forth to yourself methods of going through, let's say, treacherous ways.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way, right? Like, we had this mental exercise not even a couple of weeks ago where I was trying to map out a walking path from here in Bulgaria all the way to the south of India, right? And that's, I mean, talk about pilgrimage, right?
Yeah.
That's one hell of a walk. I reckoned it would have taken maybe 2.5 years.
Gosh.
And I mean, I was looking at the Google Map, and I put it in, and the what's it called? The walking time that it came back to me was 69 days. Now that is if you're walking consistently for 24 hours, 7 days a week,
Oh, okay.
right? I'm sure that's what it means, because when you put it into, you know, you're going down to the
69
KFC, you're going down to the KFC, it tells you 15-minute walk.
Down to the
It's not,
KFC.
it's, if you're going down to the KFC and Google tells you 15-minute walk, it doesn't take into account that you're going to stop at the park bench and sit down, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's just telling you full-on walking time, right?
Right.
So fair enough, 69 days, but that's clearly not going to happen.
So you
I
could
gotta
do it
sleep.
in a year.
I gotta sleep.
Yeah.
You know, I gotta eat. I walk through desert possibly. I'm not sure where I was going with this, but
Preparing yourself
you're preparing
mentally.
yourself mentally. That's right. Let's take that as an exercise, right? Now, my physical nature, I'm just gonna be walking. Hopefully, it's gonna be a bit flat. There's gonna be some mountains I'm gonna walk through. You just gotta do it. You know, do you go on the treadmill and make sure you're ripped? No, you just gotta make sure that your heart's not gonna fail. You know, you haven't eaten too many KFCs. You know, it's like that's about it. It's the kind of thing that you just do.
I disagree.
I mean, I think a lot of people out there are probably shouting, going, "No way, dude! You climb Everest, you got to take in that."
Correct.
But I'm not doing that. I'm not climbing Everest. You know, you were walking. I've done that before. I know how to walk. And
Yeah, and you know how sore your feet get and how bad
precisely,
your
and
knees get and
going
all
up
that.
to 2,000 meters, and in a 4-hour period, I know how much physical exhaustion happens. Now, then I know I'll stop after 4 hours and take a break. That's why I'm saying 2.5 years. Because
We're going to go very slowly.
yeah, I'm going to take my time so I don't die or my heart gives out, you know, while I'm walking. So that's what I mean. It's like I know that that's what my body requires for me to stop at a 4-hour period. But because my mental state is aligned in that sense, if that makes any
Yes.
any sense.
It does. I still think that, again, as I said, I'm coming from it from a different point of view. And the different
Absolutely,
point
yeah.
of view is I'm trying to, before I even think about heading toward this temple of truth, which I think you got absolutely spot on, that the first, because we did explore this in the previous series, but that truth comes first. Once you can understand truth, once you can recognize truth, then you can move on to the beauty and then the goodness. I mean, those two, I think, flow very easily once you've reached truth.
Mm-hmm.
Truth is the difficult one. It's
Yeah.
like getting to base camp, you know, if you have to walk all the way up to Everest base camp, which most people don't walk all that way. But as I said, it's really important before going on this pilgrimage that my version of what you're saying, of this inner preparation, is really trying to remove the crutches that I've given myself and the expectations, the ideas, for example, that I have to be a vegetarian or that I have to do yoga, you know, that without these physical aids, which they are physical aids to certain abilities, it can't really be properly done. The equivalent of you saying, do I have to be ripped, you know? I think there are a lot of these signposts. I mean, when I see it in my mind, I see a landscape where there are signposts pointing in every single possible direction, and they're all so close to each other that they're almost like a thicket or a fence. And I'm standing kind of in the center of this ring of ideas, particularly concepts, ideas that are not my own. They have not arisen out of my own experience.
Yeah.
What I'm standing on in this spiritual, this astral world vision, what I'm standing on is the ground of my own experience. But that's a small circle around which is this fence of, if you can imagine, signposts, wooden signposts, that are all saying different things and pointing in different directions. And I don't care right now which ones of those are correct, because there's too many of them for me to be able to discern that. What I know is what I'm standing on, that small patch of ground, it came into being, let's put it that way, based on my own direct experiences. And I can trust that because that is mine.
Yeah.
That's
As I
mine.
was saying before, it's all you have.
It's all I have, correct. It's this firm ground I'm standing on.
Don't get me wrong, I completely agree with everything you're saying. I suppose the previous monologue, if you will, was more of an exercise in understanding what that experience could possibly mean for the context of pilgrimage of self or pilgrimage within self. Because the idea or the physicality of doing a pilgrimage outside still involves all those, preparatory steps. It should not be that much different for one in self, except for maybe the physicality part. You could probably do it sitting down, and discover that aspect or that process of the pilgrimage, or it comes naturally. Rather, it comes naturally because you've been thinking about it, or it's a sensation within yourself.
That's
yeah. But and again, I think it relates back to seeking, and I think that's a very important part of it, is to want to seek it. Yeah.
Well, yes, I've wanted to seek enlightenment and all those words, for many, 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 many years. And I have sought it, not just wanted to, I have sought it in the best way I knew how. I think the sitting down, as you said, is very interesting because it makes me think of those gurus and saints, not just in India like you imagine, but in Europe, everywhere around the world, where they do sit down somewhere and they're still and they go on an inner journey. But even that has its process of letting go before you even sit down.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's where I'm at right now, is this process of letting go. And it's not lost on me that on the dark moon, which we just had yesterday, I believe. Yesterday the 25th?
Today is the 25th, yes.
Okay, so the dark moon for us was even just this morning, overnight, last night, 24th, 25th. And Saturn moved signs last night, or early this morning, on Saturday. So what it seems to me is that's a real crossing of the threshold in the dark. The dark moon is you see nothing. It's completely pitch black dark. And in the middle of that total darkness, a hugely powerful time, essentially Saturn represents time at one level, moves, crosses a threshold. And that's really how I feel. Like at the moment, it's dark, a threshold's being crossed, I'm crossing an inner threshold, but it's still so dark that I really can't see which way I should go. So I'm deciding to stand still, but preparing myself to just basically burn down this fence of ideas.
Yeah. It seems like every process begins with destruction.
So true.
And ends with destruction. That's kind of like a cosmic, what's it called? A cosmic component, a cosmic reality.
Yeah.
Stars do it.
It's a cycle, isn't it?
It's a cycle, precisely. A karma, if you will. Yeah, but I think that's we've gone for a long time, so this is a good time to stop, and had a lot of interesting thoughts, ideas. I'm glad what we've discussed this. Thanks everyone out there for listening.
Thank you.
And joining us on this pilgrimage / journey. all you seekers out there. Hopefully you find your method of inner pilgrimage, and that you find the temple of truth.
Let us know where it is.
Yeah, let us know. Is it below the heart? I'm thinking maybe behind the lungs.
Oh wow, it's interesting. Okay, maybe that's something to talk about tomorrow.
Yeah,
but,
no.
Or in our next
Possibly,
episode,
possibly
as we say.
not. Maybe it's outside us. Or yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you in the next episode, and I open my heart to you, give you my love.
Take
Bye
care.
now.
Bye now.
I swear it's not a world of men.
We did a hat show of hats I wear that are made up of alienated...
It is not a world of men machine.
There's a how here. Why
World
are,
of
why
clock
are these
watchers.
wonderful swimsuits that Julia wears,
Bureaucrats.
among others, why are they so...
Office holders.